So next other question is, before again we jump into it, I remember, I think the first grand round you came to the Durham grand round, and prior to you joining us in 2006, we always have this kind of a misconception. We're thinking that melanoma is perhaps radio resistant. It doesn't work as well. I remember first few times when you start speaking to us and you showed us some of the literatures. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, why is it that at one point people think radiotherapy doesn't work for melanoma, and like how does this get changed?
It's a very good question, and it really takes a long look back into the history of radiation therapy and the treatment of melanoma, which is something that goes back, 100 years basically. Some very early reports from centers, that took care of a lot of people with melanoma, including, Memorial Sloan Kettering, or what is now Memorial Sloan Kettering, suggested that the use of radiation therapy didn't, lead to a response very often. That was kind of the conclusion that people arrived at in some of those early retrospective clinical analyses. If you go back to some of those, including one very famous one from Memorial, published by Dr. Frank Adair in the 1930s, and you look at the data, there weren't too many patients that were treated with radiation therapy exclusively. But if you really look carefully at the data, their outcomes actually are quite similar to those treated with surgery, which is considered, the standard of care, still at this point for many people with melanoma.
Especially back then, that you're taking a much wider margin,
Yes. So, I mean, the approach with surgery in those days, as well as with radiation therapy, is likely very different than what it is today. But, subsequent studies kind of looked into this trend, and, there was a suggestion that melanoma didn't respond as often to radiation therapy as other cancers. But really, if you kind of look very carefully, what you find is that there's a wide range in terms of the responses that you see. There are patients that do respond. There's no doubt about that. Good research studies have shown that. But it's not as though all patients, with melanoma respond to radiation therapy. Frankly, the same could be said of almost all other cancers as well. So melanoma is not unique in this respect.